This is your WUSF 89.7 FM all night jazz host Simon Lasky here with you, excited to tell you about a new series we're calling At Home With. Each week I'll be sitting down with an internationally recognised jazz musician and talking about their life in music and especially how they've been responding a little bit to the circumstances we find ourselves in with the coronavirus at the moment. And this week I'm sitting down with Rich DeRosa. Rich is a Grammy-nominated composer, arranger, drummer, educator. He's head of the jazz and composing and arranging program at UNT, the University of North Texas. He's composed and arranged for Wynton Marsalis and the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra for the last 20 years. He's worked writing for Gerry, Willie Nelson, Cassandra, Norah Jones. What Rich DeRosa doesn't know about jazz composing and arranging isn't worth knowing. I hope you enjoy the interview. How are you finding, I have lessons myself, and you're just dying to get on the piano and show someone a chord. Are you jumpy on the piano and you're still showing the chord? And is it?
Well, you can see my keyboard here, so you can't actually. Well, now you could.
Right.
But you still can't see it. I'd have to have an overhead camera, and it's not ideal. Or like when I do private lessons with Skype.
Yeah.
It's different because then the guys send me the scores, and the composer is. The person on the other end has a keyboard, and I have my keyboard, and then we can hear each other. And one-on-one composition teaching is, I think it's pretty easy. But it's like with classes, if you had to demonstrate to write it on the board, and they have a whiteboard in Zoom you can draw, but it's not static. Right. It's not set up for music, No,
but that'll be the next thing. Are you concerned at all that it's kind of like a two-part question, really, and I wonder what your thoughts are, where the things we love and value are, especially in jazz, solo jazz there's some good, solo piano albums, some great ones, but really, if we think about jazz, we're talking about jazz. For the most part, it's more than one human making music at the same time, right?
Yeah.
It's almost what we celebrate, from a trio to a big band to I've seen you conducting Wynton Marsalis and the Jazz at Lincoln Center, and you've done some incredible projects, and you're music director, head of composing and arranging at UNT. Do you conduct the 1 o'clock band, or I know on your CD?
No, I don't. That's not my position. My position is I'm in charge of the composition and arranging.
Right.
I teach all the students, and I usually write a piece each year for the band to play, and then when I go and rehearse it, I'll conduct it.
Okay, cool. Because I have your it's beautifully and deliberately placed, right?
Oh yes.
Yeah. So that's with your Grammy nominated, the piece now.
Grammy nominated. Yeah.
Let me get back to that kind of question, which is some of the things we're doing now. Are you concerned that if they become the new normal, we'll sort of somehow not be making the things we value, which is making music in the same place, responding with an audience, teaching as a sort of really important social and human interaction? Are you concerned that we'll lose some of that, or will we come out and we'll be so desperate for it, we'll be leaping around and like booking jazz gigs all over the place?
I think it's interesting because we've all been forced into this other alternative mode of having to produce stuff, and I think some things maybe we'll learn some good things about it, but I think we'll have a greater appreciation too for the in the moment kind of thing. It's funny, I'm involved with a project now. It's more of a pop kind of I want to say theater, because
I was going to ask you what you're working on at the moment.
It's it's like some standards, and you can do some nice things with, and it's strings and horns and rhythm section. And,
who's it with, Rich? Which band? Which ensemble?
Oh, it's a young man named Robert Bannon. He's a singer in the New York area.
And you're putting the music around your commission to write.
I'm writing the charts, and then sending the score, and all the players are in their house. They're doing all the tracks and putting it all together. So, but I think it's easier because even when a few moments of improvisation, it's very controlled. When you were saying about the jazz thing, I always thought about when I'm explaining jazz to a non jazz audience, I like to think about it like a sports event. So like in your country, it might be cricket or something.
Oh, thank you. Wow, yeah.
But
First
in your
American to mention
country,
cricket to me.
you know, it's probably football or baseball baseball is, since it's older, is maybe people would say that's the traditional American sport, whatever. But, you know, there are, like with baseball, there's 9 players, there's 4 bases. The runner is going to run around the bases in a clockwise direction. There's all these rules, right? And you think, okay, well, if everybody knows how many innings we're going to play and whatever, and we know what's going to, all these rules, why do people go? It's like, I've seen that game before. They go because they don't know what's going to happen. It's the human interaction within the confines of the format, you know? And that's what jazz is, right? So this idea of like, well, we're going to play a blues. Well, man, I've heard the blues before, or I've heard whatever it is, or I've heard that group before. Well, yeah, but you know, they're going to play the music again and something else might happen this time that's different.
Yeah.
So we will definitely lose that if everything is measured out, you know? And yes, you can do it with a film score. It has to be. You know, I tell my students when we're in that domain, I said, you know, there's no such thing as a fermata in a film score because everything is to a click. So you have to time out everything.
Right.
You know, or solo performance, or like with, you know, a controlled production where we lay these tracks down or everybody does their own part. It's scripted, you know, it's fine. And it comes together and people can appreciate it. But the thing with interaction in the moment, especially for what jazz is known for.
Yeah.
And now I think it can be done, but it's got to be done in a, well, I'll give you a perfect example. Like, let's say it's a big band chart. Typically in a pop production, you might say, well, we're going to lay down the drum tracks first or the rhythm tracks first, and then we're going to put everything else on.
Yeah.
Well, that's because everything is rhythmic based. And yes, jazz is rhythmic based too. But the role of the drummer in a big band, I mean, you know, from you write a drum part, you're really not writing a drum part. You're writing a guide saying, here's what the band is doing. And the drummer has to make up his own part. So even the conventional role of playing time for the band, and then the fills and everything, pretty much most of it is improvised. So it doesn't make sense for the drummer to lay down the track first, right? So you might make a MIDI track of a basic track that all the horn players and maybe the bass or whatever, everybody else does their thing. And the last thing to go on is the drums. Why? Because you want the drums to react to the written parts. So whatever, to me, that would be the thing. Say, like, can you make a record, an interactive record like this? Yes. But all of the scripted parts have to go down first. So the improviser goes on before the rhythm section, because in other words, the improviser, the trade-off of that is the improviser doesn't get to react to the rhythm section. But, otherwise it's like the rhythm section has to react to, let's say it's a sax solo. That sax solo should be there first, because by nature of the rhythm section, they're accompanists,
Yeah, I think what you're describing is a very imperfect scenario. And if we're trying to, go on, carry on.
No, I was just going to say, now we're thrust into it. If we discover anything, it's because we have to. There's no alternative right now. I think once we come out of this and we go back to our normal life, we'll have more options. I mean, I know people who make a living doing just, recording a single track and
I do too. And you can, they wake up to a list of 10 emails and whoever's offering the most to put down a certain thing, they'll fire it off. Yeah.
It's never going to work with an interactive trio setting or something like that, Do
you know those Shirley Horn records from towards, I'm sure you do, from towards the end of her life? She kind of had that Indian summer, and there's that one, Here's to Life, and there's something, I think Alan Broadbent.
Johnny Mandel, beautiful.
Yeah, I think Alan Broadbent did some stuff with her, and Johnny Mandel was, have you my understanding is those records is Shirley Horn did the rhythm, her and her rhythm section, I think was Billy Hart, and then the strings were put on afterwards. Have you ever had that project where it's like, here's, can you talk a bit about that? I'd love to know how, because
I did a project for Joey Alexander.
Yeah, right.
You know, Joey is an amazing talent, but he's a kid.
Yeah.
You know, and this was back in, this was 2018, 2 years ago.
Right.
And so he was at the ripe old age of 15, I think.
Yeah, right.
You know? So, and so what I didn't want to do was to take him out of his comfort zone and say, you have to adapt yourself to my arrangements, you know? So what I did was I had him send me recordings. Said, send me recordings either, and I want you to send me recordings of your group the way you're doing the material now.
Yeah, so don't think that there might be something else there. Play as you want to play rather than leave space for me.
You know, sometimes they record something and then they're playing it out on the road and it evolves and we don't do it that way anymore. Right. Like the record, we have a different intro or whatever. Right. So, you know, I wasn't interested in that. I said, if you have anything that you recorded and that you're doing the same way, then you can send me the actual studio recording.
Right.
Otherwise, I don't care if it's like a basement homemade tape. Yeah. Whatever. I need to get a sample of the way your group plays it, the tempo, the phrasing, the activity, all of that. And so then I put that into I put that track into Digital Performer,
right,
and then did a tap tempo so that I could get my computer to align with the bars and beats of the audio recording.
Just so, what was the brief? Strings, full brass, like what was your...
Yeah, Jazz at Lincoln Center hired me to write string arrangements.
Right.
So anyway, so now I have his small group recordings, and then I put that into Digital Performer, and I did a MIDI mock-up of the string arrangement, and mixed it together, and then sent it back to him. So that he and his father, who's kind of like his manager, can approve the arrangement. Right. So that's another thing. At UNT, I make all my students learn MIDI production. I said, you know, we're in this world where even in jazz, people want to hear a mock-up.
You're not concerned that your samples don't do what you know, like a beautiful diminuendo, flautando on the. Well, it is not going to sound like you want it to sound.
I use what's called Controller 7. So I'm using it tapers and it crescendos and it does like that. You know, it creates enough of a realism, you know, and we're not trying to, it's not going to be a final, like it was like, okay, well, this is going out in the theaters or on TV or something. It's really just, it's a mock-up as good as you can make it for it to, so everybody hears it. And
so you're almost safeguarding your own time so that you don't get to the studio and you're saying, well, I really don't like that at all. You're almost kind of giving yourself a buffer saying, well, yeah.
You know, and the whole idea, and that's what Johnny Mandel, according to what I had read, he was the same thing, that Shirley Horn was very apprehensive about, you know, putting herself in that context. And he was great because he said, man, you just do what you do. And I'm going to wrap this orchestra around you. And boy, did he do a great job. I mean,
it's one of my favorite records, man. I mean,
and I, you know, for me, I really enjoy doing that. Now here's another thing, because, you know, you have, especially with a solo pianist, right? Shirley Horn, Joey Alexander, or any other pianist, and you as a pianist can appreciate this. You know, it's different than a horn player because we don't know what the harmony of the second is going to be, right? The voicing.
We're taking away a lot of your decision making because we're saying, look, here's a 9-note chord, and so you're going to find some space.
For me, my role was, how do I make Joey comfortable so he doesn't even have to think about it? You know, he does what he does, and these strings miraculously happen around him.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that pretty much, unless he changed something on the fly and did something, but otherwise I'm anticipating, it's like, well, here's the voicing. It sounds like he's going to do. So I'll either maybe not voice the strings, or if I do, maybe I'll do something that's a voicing that's much, a shell essentially that can allow for some flexibility in the piano voicing, or finding the holes. Say, okay, there's room for me here. So I can. So now the strings can. I suppose it's. Let's take a room. Let's suppose you have a room and it's a nice room, but you decide, well, I'm gonna add drapes and curtains to this room. And you look in and say, man, that looks great. Well, the room probably looked fine without the drapes and the curtains.
Yeah.
So that's the small group, and the strings didn't have to be there, but once you get used to them, you realize, wow, this is a thing that adds dimension without changing the original thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's a really neat thing. And with technology, it makes it really possible.
Yeah. And just out of curiosity, when you sent those MIDI files with the strings to Joey and his dad and his team, did they come back? Did they want many modifications, or they signed it off right there and then? They're like, we love it. And
pretty much, they were pretty happy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it worked out pretty well, I got to say,
And talk a bit, Rich, about your you've worked with Wynton Marsalis and Jazz at Lincoln Center since 2001, I was reading. So you've had a very long-standing and close relationship with them. And Wynton calls. He's got this Bernstein project for next year. It's the 100th anniversary of Bernstein's birth, and they want a big concert in New York City. And you're in charge of the arrangements and the conducting and you're going to present this music with Wynton and the band. What's the next day like? I heard you in an interview recently, and you spoke a bit about you're a kind of get on with it straight away guy. You're pretty keen to get into it. You don't walk in the woods for 3 months thinking about. What's your process? I know we see you in your studio there, where you're in your home place there. What's your method and process?
Well, let me preface it by saying that I think it's easier when you're doing an arrangement versus a composition.
Yeah, it's two different things, right?
Because the arrangement exists already. So like when I got the Bernstein assignment, it was really not so much about writing what I'm going to write right away. It was looking through his repertoire and thinking about what I was going to do. Or choosing.
Did you pick the songs, Rich? Did you pick the songs?
I chose the tunes. Yeah, wow. and Vince chose his. Yeah, so here's the thing. I didn't know what Vince was going to do, but we have different styles, which is also, I think, and Wynton, man, he's so smart. He is that. He had just Vince and I, because we have different approaches, and I think Wynton knew that, that we were going to come up with different choices and different approaches to the thing. And that's the beauty of it. So each of us did 5 pieces, and but I'm kind of like, I'm going to jump right on it. So I started putting together a list, and I stayed in contact with Vince the whole time. And did you fight over anything? Were you both desperate to do somewhere, or and then you kind of fought over it, or was it? I don't remember. No, I don't think so. I think we just found different things, because he had different influence. We were exposed to different aspects of Bernstein, which was neat, But I knew I wanted to open with Tonight, because you need a big opener, and the lyric says it all, right? Tonight won't be just any night. Yeah. Nice. And it's a really powerful tune, and so I wanted it to be kind of like epic and like a big overture type thing. And I knew I wanted to close the evening with There'll Be Some Other Time. Oh my God, I was just you read my mind. And Bill Evans, did you take that Bill Evans shell, which does that very kind of flat modal thing on it? Yeah, We'll Catch Up. We'll Catch Up Some Other Time. And so to me, and this is, it's such a special thing, First of all, to have the honor of dealing with Leonard Bernstein's music. Yeah, right. And with that band, it was special, really special. So I'm grateful for that. But I think for everybody, we all were there to love this great musician, and
Yeah.
what he gave to the music world, and as a teacher too, amazing. But
The way he speaks about music possibly better than anyone from the last century. I
and,
mean, those Norton lectures are just out of this world.
So it wasn't just, okay, let me think about the music. It was, let me think about the whole experience for all of us, people, you know. And so I said, boy, I've always loved that tune. Some other time, and the lyrics, you know.
It's heartbreaking. It's really sad.
Yeah, you know, it's like we have to split up now. We have to go our separate ways, but let's not say goodbye. We'll catch up some other time, you know. And I think, boy, that's a really nice sentiment, you know. So I knew
again, I've mentioned the Bill Evans though. Have you his version? Now, did you manage to get that out of your head, or were you happy to have that somewhere lurking in the back of your head?
Yeah, I did it. I did a different thing. I did more like what maybe. I was thinking more like what Sondheim might do with it or something.
Right.
You know.
Right.
It's much more theatrical, I guess.
Okay.
I don't know. Just I wanted to find my own take. That was another thing, you know, the challenge, and I think Vince probably felt the same way, that here we are, we're arranging this great composer's music. So if we just, you know, kind of do it in too much in the way he would do it, it's like, well, why are we doing this then?
That's really interesting. You know? That's really.
So, well, the best example I can give you, the one tune is another one that I did called "Lucky to Be Me."
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, man, you know, here's Bernstein. It's like, wow, what a lucky guy. What a great career he had. You know, a great life. And so I'm thinking, man, this is another thing that would be another way to celebrate him. Lucky to be me. And so that arrangement was because he loved jazz, right? So to this sense of collaboration, and I think for jazz musicians who maybe are less familiar with classical music or having difficulty making the transition into that style of music, Bernstein is one of the go-to places. You know, you hear Cool from West Side Story, and it's got the swing rhythm and the sense of blues, and so
it's all about the augmented fourth, isn't it, throughout the whole piece?
It's a neat way for a hardcore jazz musician who has little exposure to classical music. Say, here's a classical composer, you know, or here's a mix of the things. But anyway, so I took "Lucky to Be Me" and I did it as a Basie chart in the tune.
Nice. Yeah.
But the intro and the ending, I did kind of like more Bernstein-like. You know, it's definitely not a Basie type thing. And so the whole concept was, what if Bernstein had collaborated with Basie? How might that have? How might that have resulted? You know? And it just created this whole sense for me about the chart. And so a lot of times I like to have big ideas, you know, big sense. Or like with getting back to Joey's project, the whole thing of like the big concept was I need to accompany Joey and his trio. It's not about the arrangements standing on their own. They can in places, you know, like there was a couple of ballads where I wrote a little string introduction, you know, that might have been like 45 seconds or whatever.
Yeah, right.
That was like, okay, we're going to feature the strings, which I think that's also important because the audience, it was like Joey Alexander with strings. So if the strings are completely subordinate, 100%, then, you know, that's not fun either. So, but I had to figure out ways to feature the strings where it wouldn't get in Joey's way.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And so this is the way I work. I like parameters. I like these guidelines, and they can be artistic. Sometimes they're technical, you know, where you have limitations of players.
Right,
you know?
right.
And that could be, you could have, let's say, a player, you know, with chop problems, but you have to feature that player at that point in time. Say, man, you can't write for this player like you normally would because he's dealing with chop problems. So you say, all right, well, what can I work with? What's you know, or when somebody does hire me, let's say to do a commission, I don't just go, I'm looking for a context, because it's computers don't play our music, and our mind doesn't play our music as far as getting it out to the public. Players play our music. And one of the things, to me, the big lessons that we can take from Duke Ellington and Billy Strayhorn is that, yes, they wrote for instruments, but they were, more importantly, they were writing for people who play those instruments. And so, one of my favorite questions to make the point to my students is, what's the range of the trumpet? And the answer should be, it depends on who's playing.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah. Rich, can we go back to Bernstein? And there's something I want to ask you specifically about your career and also how you advise students. And I'd love to hear you talk about this a bit. Bernstein, I'm a bit of a Bernstein geek. I've read a lot of his books about him, and he was happy because he had this wonderful gift and obviously had an incredibly rich life. But his professional life was very frustrating for him, and it got him down quite a lot. He thought of himself primarily as a composer. He couldn't kind of tear himself away from the New York Phil or the Vienna Symphony, and these big orchestras were cool and offering money, and he was also an educator. So he had these three strands, which I know you do as well, and lots of us do. And do you struggle with the balance? Are you at peace with it? If you've had a busy week, or if you've had a year go by and you're like, wow, I did loads of conducting guest spots and I was featuring with this band and this band, but man, I haven't written a new note of music all year. Do you consciously try and balance that? Is that something you work on, or are you at peace with it? You just let it evolve as it will?
Yeah, I've always had that. And like Bernstein, although I wouldn't say I'm in his league, but we're similar.
He was frustrated that he didn't compose more.
Well,
he was unhappy about that.
He was a great conductor, composer, teacher, and he loved to play the piano. And when I was doing the Bernstein project for Wynton, that's one of the things I came to realize, that, man, he was like, man, I love to play the piano. And so what I decided to do was include the first movement of this piano suite, and I love the title of this. It's called Touches. And I didn't know it.
No, I don't know.
Bernstein's. It's a piano piece.
I don't know.
It's called Touches.
Wow.
And I took I think it was the first movement. It's only like 21 bars, and I didn't even. I said, man, I'm not going to mess with this. So I had Dan Nimmer. Dan is the pianist, the Lincoln Center Band. Yeah. And just, he played it. And I told the audience that. I said, look, you're going to hear Bernstein's piece, this thing called Touches. You're going to hear one of the movements from it. And it set up this whole, I wrote a big suite that was like this pas de deux, which is a beautiful dance from On the Town. And then that segued into Somewhere.
Oh, man, I can't wait to hear that. That sounds a great idea.
It starts with Touches, and it was just a beautiful piano piece, But anyway, my career has always been three parts, and I look at it kind of like on a plate. It's like if you go to a buffet table, right? It's like there's whatever you can put on that plate, you put as much on that plate as you can, but and of course at a buffet, we can't take it off again. But let's suppose, you decide, oh man, I don't like this piece of food, or this was great today, but I don't think I'll put that on my plate today. I feel like doing this, So I've always kind of done that, and I guess part of that is just how we make a living. I always wanted to make a living doing what I love, and so part of my career is in performance. And then the other part was in composition and arranging, and the other part has been teaching. And I've always kept all three going, although at this point in my career, the playing thing, and this was kind of by choice too, the playing thing is fun for me. I enjoy doing it, I'll go do a gig.
Still play kit, right? Still play kit?
Yeah.
Yeah, great, man. Yeah. I should just tell our listeners that we connected because I was eulogizing about one of my favorite Gerry Mulligan recordings at the USF Festival last summer.
And, right. Oh, that's right.
If you remember the conversation, right? I was like, I just love this Lonesome Road. And you turned around and you said, I played drums on that. And I sort of started Hero. I was just on my, that was why I sort of like, I kind of lost it for a minute, and I went to buy you drinks and everything. Yeah, but I really, yeah, that was.
Yeah. But yeah, you know, it was so at that time in the 1980s when I was touring, and Gerry didn't tour that much, but you know, when he did, it was nice, you know, nice paying, whatever. And but I always did a lot of things, and even as writing, you know, a lot of my career was not in jazz. I did a lot of things. I love writing for dramatic context. You know, I've written for film and some like daytime television things. And
Rich, it's so funny. You're talking, and it's fascinating hearing you talk about how you think about music, and then it's brought me every tail end of your answer is my next question. What do you prophesize for the future of, this is a biggie, for the future of sophisticated music? And I would obviously include jazz within that. But then there's a second part, which is something where, and you know where I'm coming from, are you concerned that us as a jazz community, that we do things for each other, or that is only understood by each other? And do you have motivations to, even though that might be the case, make sure that actually, okay, your best alto sax player friend is so impressed with how clever the way you got from this chord or this tonal area to that one, but actually, you know, your mum's, you know, mother-in-law's absolutely kind of just gets like a goosebumps, and so it's a sort of two-part question: the future of sophisticated music, which I sometimes get concerned about in terms of a global thing, and B, as jazz musicians, are we writing too much for each other? And you work in commercial music a lot, so I know that's not really directed at you or anyone, but I'm curious as to your thoughts and whether it's got better or worse. And
yeah,
anyway.
I think I would tend to go with think about, well, I hate to skew in one direction. Balance for me is a big component in my own life. And I think art thrives when it has good balance, and which often means opposing, you know, different aspects. Not all, it's like black and white, good and bad,
right,
dissonant, consonant. You know, that in order to appreciate dissonance, there needs to be some consonants and whatever. But so the thing is, I think there are times where we can satisfy or do things that are gratifying with our musical colleagues. Oh man, so and so, you know, we're going to really dig this. We're going to really like this. But I think if it skews too far into that, what's going to happen is we're going to have a more limited audience, because a lot of people, or I think what maybe could happen is that the music, somehow the audience picks up on the characteristics of that music, and I think they say, what's in it for me?
Would that actually alter a musical decision you make in your studio, you're composing? Will the thought you've just said to me, will that ever literally make you go, you know what, I've been chromatic for so long, for the last 112 bars, I need to come out of this to give the audience something to grab onto before I get back to it? Will it influence your music making to that extent?
I think here are the balance. Like, for example, if the harmony is really complex, then maybe people relate to melody.
Yeah.
And even the great Bob Brookmeyer, you know, I think people, I think I'm curious about how many young people really know young Bob Brookmeyer, the music that he wrote, you know, and even as a player, I mean, you know, they're playing with Clark Terry.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and by the way, I don't know if you ever heard that record with him and Bill Evans. He's playing piano. It's really great. It's the Ivory Hunters.
Okay, I don't. I will check it as soon as we finish. I will check it out.
But you know, the thing is that Bob Brookmeyer, for all his modernism, comes out of roots of swing and melody and understanding the discipline of consonants. I think there are, you know, maybe composers today can dismiss things that are consonant for the sense of it being simple, rather than saying, you know, I mean, if you think about it, you have to be a lot more crafty dealing with consonants, because man, if they don't resolve right, there's awkwardness.
That's brilliant.
Right?
And also because the listeners are more familiar with it. So you need to deal with it in a really, like, everyone's going to know if you screw up. Yeah.
And it's not to denigrate any modern music, but let's suppose the pianist is playing a recital, and it's classical recital, right? And so the pianist is playing Vivaldi or Clementi or something like that, right? And then now the pianist is going to play some Webern. Well, where are you going to hear the wrong note?
Yeah,
You're going to hear it in the classical music.
Yeah.
It's it's the same thing, it's with students I'm talking about, for the students to understand. If you want to write like Bob Brookmeyer, then that means you need to go back to where he came out of to really understand it. Go backwards to go forward.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Bob, he was dissonant, he was audacious, but he was also funny. I mean, I love American Express. There's tremendous control of styles, in and out of things, funny, melodic, swinging. And then what about First Love Song? I mean, diatonic major. Why?
Yeah.
Because it's First Love Song.
The name of the song, yeah.
First meaning innocent, love meaning should be happy and sweet. There's a guy who knows how to underscore, where it's like connecting himself to what do I want to say as a person? And so for me, because let's face it, composition is very personal. Arranging is different. And yes, we can arrange for ourselves and then it's personal. But I think, in the profession, when we're asked to arrange something, even if it's a jazz thing, perfect example, Thad Jones, right? Thad Jones, when he arranged, Basie asked him to arrange or create some new pieces, and he wrote what's going to eventually be the beginning of his band with Mel.
Yeah.
When Basie turned down those charts, or when you listen to the Basie, if you look about all the arrangers that went through the legacy of that band.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you can probably count up to 10 of them,
mm-hmm.
But even let's say there's 5 of them that you want to say. They all wrote in that template, because it's not about, hey man, this is jazz. It's Basie. It's like, this is what we do.
Yes.
And if you're going to arrange for our band, then you need to understand what that is. And
if you go outside it, form your own band.
And that's it. So if you're going to write music that is whatever, it's going to be free, hey man, I got to do my thing, then that's probably, you're either got to find a band that's willing to do that with you, or you got to find your own band and then do it. Yeah. But I think arranging, in a sense, brings to the fore this idea of discipline and writing on demand, what people need. It's not about what you want. And then you have to find the art within that, and then you can go and write your own pieces, But to me, getting back to let's say the chromatic thing. So balance is important as far as just the large elements. A great book for people to read is What to Listen For in Music. Aaron Copland. It's a little book.
Wow.
Easy read. It's fantastic, and he cuts through all of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, Aaron Copland, man, great, right? He could write. You hear some of his early works. He could write complex.
He was writing in serial music, and then
yes,
you
exactly.
to Appalachian Spring. You're like, well, that's yeah.
So, but he talks about the elements, and so, for example, let's suppose we have a very complex harmony. Mm-hmm. So that element, because that's complex, you say, well, maybe we need to balance that out with something that's simple. First Love Song is a great example. Getting back to Brookmeyer.
Yeah.
Writes this, E flat major. And somebody, and that's the lesson, for young composers who are like trying to break out and say, well, yeah, but look what he did. He gave us a very singable melody that underscores first love song, and then he goes crazy with all the harmony underneath, but without destroying, he's like, whatever harmony he chooses, it still has to agree with the note in some fashion,
So you do care about your listeners. It sounds like you do, and Brookmeyer, I think you did it. But when whatever your project is, and obviously this in commercial side is what you do, but if you're finding your harmony is getting very chromatic, you're probably thinking, my groove is actually going to have to be pretty kind of straightforward, so that I'm giving something to latch onto to get through to where I want.
Absolutely. It's the same thing with writing counterpoint, let's say. Like, all right, well, I've got this main theme, and I'm going to add another line, and I'm going to add another line, whatever. So you can do all of that, but to remember what the listener has to process, and that's the hard thing for us as composers and arrangers, is that we have to get outside of ourselves. We're coming at it one way, think, okay, technical, this is what I want to do. I want to add this. And then we stop. They're hearing this for the first time, right? Not like what we did. It was like, we know every nook and cranny.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So to me, it's like, really, what are we asking to do when we write counterpoint? I love writing counterpoint, but
and you do it amazing on your album. That's one of the things. It's just incredible, man. Beautiful.
But, when I'm thinking like, okay, well, what's the response? What am I asking the listener to do? I'm asking the listener to listen to 3 or 4 things at once. And how do I do that and give clarity? So maybe they need to be in different locations sound-wise. They need to be moving at different rates of speed. They maybe need to be different color.
Nice.
Nice. So it's kind of like the thing of like, you look at a graph, let's say, and there's 4 lines. They're not all black lines, are they? They're confusing. There's a blue line, there's a red line, there's a green line. I got to plug in my computer here. I'm going to hold on a minute.
Sure. I can talk to our listeners about your wonderful CD, which is called Perseverance.
Thank you. Yeah. But yeah, I think that, and in the beginning, well, I think the sooner students can do that, the better. So for me, when I'm working, it doesn't matter. It's like day one, it's like, no, let's think about what learning how to listen and to react. I think one of the good things, like when a student does get it into a MIDI mock-up form, whether it's simple playback on Finale or Sibelius or something more elaborate through a digital audio program, stop looking at the score, turn the other way, and then
yes,
and try to imagine you're hearing it for the first time. The other thing I'll say for me is that I think about music as far as the listener is concerned, maybe the way an author would, and I'm going to use a novel since it's fictitious, right? Because we're making up something, and so it lives in this abstract world. But if you think about how an author might write a novel, and he or she has to invent characters, has to invent motives, right? Reasons for the characters to exist, how they're going to react, what's the sense of purpose, what do they have to do? And the obligation for that author is, you can make those characters do or say anything you want, right? Harry Potter, kids can fly on brooms. As long as it's feasible,
But that's my problem with some of that stuff. Is that if anything is feasible, then actually you have more decisions to make, and your narrative might not be convincing.
But it's like, okay, the author is going to tell a fantastic story. Like, oh, that can't really happen in real life. Well, we have to suspend belief, and the author has to set that up so that we believe that, And the other thing is that, like, once the characters get developed, there are certain expectations. I think these 2 characters are going to fall in love. Oh, these 2 characters hate each other. Boy, I wonder when they're going to come to blows, or whatever. There's motives, and that the author sets it up. And then, for example, let's take something mechanical like a deceptive cadence, right? So we can do a deceptive cadence. It means it goes into, instead of going to the 251, we go 256 or 254. We go to another place. Okay, well, so great. That's a technical thing. Why would we do that? Well, maybe if we start to think of it like irony in a story, where it's like the author sets up a certain thing, and now we have certain expectations that's what a thing that's going to happen between two characters or whatever, right? And then all of a sudden a different thing happens, but it's feasible, right? But we go, oh man, didn't see that coming.
I really like the word feasible.
So this idea of, or here's the other thing, right? Let's face it, with books and movies or anything that people create, even restaurants, oh man, you're going to love this. Oh, I hated that movie. I didn't like it. So that's the other thing, if we're going to try to write something that, and we're going to say, well, I want everybody to like it, we might as well not write.
No.
To me, to make peace with that is write as sincerely as you can. And did you accomplish what you set out to do?
That's golden, man. That's golden. I love that.
Now you can live with yourself. It's like, what were you trying to say, and did you capture it? And if you kind of know what you want to say, and then some people in the audience pick up on it, and I don't mean specifically like, oh, is that where the girl gets the guy? It's not that kind of thing. It's like, wow, that it was so evocative, or it was so beautiful, or man, that was like so grungy, or what, those big feelings.
I think audiences, I think they get sincerity, whatever the language is. I think we underestimate them at our peril sometimes.
Well,
I think they get insincerity, but you might be very complex, but if it's delivered sincerely with skill, I think people actually, you don't need to understand what a tritone substitution is, or if it's delivered like you say it. And
that's where I love, especially when we get good with technique and we can harmony and sub out and add all kinds of, extensions and all of that. Now it's like, well, great, you can do all those things, but now you have to edit. And so one of the great ways to edit yourself is to, in some ways, put yourself like with lyrics or some context, or maybe it's style, where you say, no, I know I can do that. Or it's like, let's look at it from a standpoint of performance, right? So you learn to play quarter notes, eighth notes, sixteenths, dotted, whatever, right? Whole notes, right? Play the root, play the sharp nine, play the whatever, right? And you hear players, and sometimes they're just playing the root, or they're playing a whole note, or they're leaving space. It's like, those are the lessons that for the advancing musician to understand. When you go back to the masters, don't just look at all the fast notes, right? Like, for example, one of the things that I like to do, I take Miles' solo on So What. Great. And I talk about, like, directional tones and how he builds up. And the first part is he's building, root 3-5, right? And then it's the second time. Now he's doing the superimposed C major triad 11-9-7. There's patience there, and you hear it in Wayne Shorter. And this idea of, so that's one thing. But the other thing I have the students do is to look at the lengths of the phrases and look at where the beginning of the notes, the phrases begin.
Where it falls in the bar or over the bar line.
The tendency is always a right to the bar. Here's the next thing, right to the bar. And there's syncopation in where phrases, the first phrase comes in on maybe 2, and then it's on the end of 2 later on, and and that's creating a different kind of tension. And there are these little subtle things that in some ways are more important than we come out with our magnifying glass and we look at voicing. Look at these notes that he plays on here. It's like, that's like looking at taking the word knowledgeable and saying, oh, let's look at that letter. Oh, look at the N, and the K, and then like you're looking at these letters and say, man, you're missing the language. So engrossed in the letters. It's like people aren't even thinking about the letters. They're hearing the words. And then, or somebody's thinking about the words now. It's like, what word am I going to use? And you got to keep extrapolating out into the phrases and the big ideas So, and it's this, here again, a balance, right? Macro, micro, because we're making all these little micro decisions, but the micro decisions are going by in fractions of a second. The audience is not going to pick up on them, even musicians a lot of times.
I think something you just said was really, I think we're talking about the audience. And then we're talking about these phrases which start and finish on different measures in the bar and different beats in the bar. And if you had, and that sophisticated language, which the great improvisers do, are phrases going across the bar, being of different lengths, and then when they start and finish, being on different parts of the bar. If you flip that round, and if you had a really poor improvised solo, which always started but so it always starts on beat 2, for example, I think the listener would be infinitely more bored by you doing that simple thing than if you did the elegant thing of actually having phrases which start at different parts of the bar and then build and go across the bar and actually tell a story. So that's a really wonderful example of actually the sophistication being appealing to the lay listener, possibly. I don't know.
Yeah, it's bringing full circle. One of the things I always encourage my students, say, look, I'm going to show you something new, but it's not to displace. The whole idea is to keep bringing in more things, you know? So it's like, no, you still need that whole note. You need that whole rest. You need that triad. You need that dominant chord with all the extensions. You need 12 tone. You need unison. You know, you need, and I think sometimes that it's easy, and admittedly I'm generalizing, but it could be easy for some students to become enamored with here's the next technical thing. So I'm going to leave that other thing because I'm moving on. I'm not there anymore. See, I'm advanced. I'm going to the next level. And the mistake, or what I want those students to look for, is when they go back and they hear some revered musician, whether it's an improviser or composer, that they're hearing the simple things along with the complex ones. You know, the razzle dazzle, those are the glitter. Yeah, that's what everybody, you know, it's easy to notice that. Nobody's noticing the bedrock. For example, you know, it would be interesting, we could take Bill Holman, take Gil Evans, take Thad Jones, take Don Sebesky, take whoever you want, Frank Foster, right? Take them all in there and say, like, okay, here they are arranging whatever tune, a great American standard, or let's say you lifted a progression out of a standard type thing, and say, we're just going to look at their trombone voicings. The trombone voicings are not going to be that different because that's foundation. It's like physics, you know, there's an obligation in that register to capture harmony, and it's not about, well, man, I'm going to be.
I love that, man. Yeah, that's awesome.
You know?
Beautiful.
You've got a job to do, and so that's the other thing. Our music is physics. It's nature, and we can't throw out nature. We have to function within it. And so everything, you know, it's like, oh, I'm going to be innovative, so I'm going to do everything that nobody's ever done before. And it's insincere in some ways, you know. Rather than say, look, you know, I'm not going to worry about innovation. I'm just going to worry about being sincere. I'm going to try to capture this or do this, whatever. And I just want to write a good piece of music. And if somebody thinks it's innovative, or if I happen to evolve to that lofty goal, that's great. But it's like somebody trying to baseball and they want to hit a grand slam or hit a home run, you know. It's like, man, just hit the ball.
I think that was one of my problems with Schoenberg's 12-tone system, is that there's immense beauty in that language, but he's having all the time to try to avoid the physics of music. He's saying he cannot have a triad, and there might be a moment where all the will in the world wants there to be a triad emerging out of all this chromaticism and 12-tone. But if you're actually trying the entire time to ignore that kind of truism of music, then it's going to get hard work eventually. And I think that you made that pretty beautifully, that you need the simple.
And the classical world was different too, because they kept pushing, you know, and that's kind of like that thing, you know, especially all through the 1800s, you know, into the 1900s. It was keep pushing, push the boundaries.
Do you think jazz has done that too? I mean,
well, yes, we've done that too.
Keep going from him, and
we've done that too. But I think, you know, if we look at, bebop was like that, right? Bebop was saying, I mean, we're going to push, we got to get pushed into the art. This is getting too commercial. Well, what happened in reaction to that was the hard bop movement, right? We say, man, we're getting away from the blues and the grassroots and the swinging and simpler melodies and all of that, you know. And so there's Freddie Freeloader, blues, right? So, right, I mean. Does it get any simpler?
No.
You know,
no.
It's the great Miles Davis, all those great players, and they're playing. But what's the sincerity? Is like, man, this is about simplicity, and this is about like just relaxing. And Freddie Freeloader, what's the name?
He was someone who never paid his bar bill.
Freeloader, yeah. So it's kind of like, man, I want to do as little as possible.
Yeah.
You know, and instead of like right? You could have all of that. You could have all these different chords through the first 4 bars of the blues, which bebop did. Because what was the artistic goal? Make it more complex. Make it blah, 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 whatever. And so we don't throw it out, but musicians react to that and they say, hey, you know what? We're tired of all that. It's great. And we're not going to throw it out, but we can't go on doing that. It's the same thing, but da 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 ba da dee. Right? And it's just, we're just going to hang out on D Dorian for 16 measures. We're going to say goodbye to harmony, right? But how we got to have all these chords, It's there are artistic goals, and you can hear it in Wayne's writing. When Wayne, his tunes like with the Messengers, when it's blues based and soulful and whatever, and then later on he's writing beautiful bossa novas and things like Nefertiti and interesting chord progressions, right? And it's like, I don't want to write 2-5-1 anymore, or I'm going to maybe occasionally, but they, artists have, and that's the same thing with Brookmeyer. He moved on. I think of Brookmeyer's career is very much like Stravinsky in a way,
different sections where they're trying to do different
things. He had a neoclassic period, he could go, he was always
he had a serial period. Stravinsky had a serial period.
And then he goes into serial stuff and another talking about writing for the band. Here it is, the great Bob Brookmeyer and the great Mel Lewis jazz band, right? And so as Bob freely admitted, he said, man, I wrote myself out of the band because he wanted to keep going. And the band was like, man, I want something to everybody came to agree. As great as that short period was that he had with the band, which he brought some amazing work into there, but he wanted to go in another direction. So the thing, and I think this is where, getting back to film scoring and stuff, it's not that, let's say, one's music isn't good. It could be a good piece. But it's not about whether it's a good piece. It's about whether the good piece fits with the film. See, and that's the thing I think for writers to also realize is you're writing for people and you're writing for bands. If you want people to play your music, you've got to figure out what works for the people who are playing it. It's not about what you want to do all the time.
I think you see yourself as a practical musician. I think you see yourself as someone who wants to use their skills to serve. You have your own artistic stuff and your own albums, your own music, but a lot of the time you're wanting your skills to be useful to people, whether it's educationally, conducting or arranging or whatever it might be. Yeah,
it's and I kind of always thought of myself kind of like an actor with
nice.
Like especially in arranging, let's say, where I'm asked to do different things, and it's not about what I want, yet I can still do what I want, but my choices are the same way an actor would within a script, right? So now, and when the
nice man,
when the actor is open to doing that, say, man, I get to be a completely different character. I get to transform myself, and there are some actors who do the same kind of thing, whether maybe they got typecast into doing that, or they can only do that.
Which do you?
What's that?
Which are you?
Oh, I'm definitely the person that likes to go in different roles.
You're not De Niro, and we always know it's De Niro. Okay.
Yeah, for me, like I'd be one of those that could, when you hear an actor who can, I'll give you a perfect, for instance, Daniel Craig, one of your countrymen, right? James Bond. Now, I never knew his career prior to James Bond. Well, I just saw a film called Knives Out.
Yeah, it's really different. It's really different.
He plays an investigator from New Orleans, and he's got the accent, man. It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
you wouldn't know he's British.
Yeah.
Russell Crowe, right? He's an Aussie, but he can do an American accent.
Yeah.
So there are some actors who can totally change their voice, and so I look at that with my writing. It's like, if there's no room for me to, even though my roots are in jazz, it's like, no, there's no, or I'm gratified, but it's like, no, I don't need to write jazz. I'm writing what works, what's sincere for the moment or for what the product is. And at the same time, every once in a while I get to do like that was like with the Bernstein one, it was, man, I get to do a tribute to Basie, right in that style, which is always fun.
Yeah.
And with the dynamics and all of that stuff that makes those Basie charts so much fun, and yet mix it with Leonard Bernstein. I did also on that program, I took Cool, so now it's like, so what am I going to do? Do Cool the same way Bernstein did? Like, man, that's why, so I figured, well, Carlos Henriquez is a great bassist, man. He's been with the band. He's amazing.
He can play almost anything, and he makes it look so easy.
I know, he's incredible. But so anyway, I figured this is going to be good and I'm thinking Cool, right? Because the whole thing, the premise of that scene there is where the gang leader is saying to his gang, you got to be cool around the cops. You're losing your temper.
Yeah.
You have to keep, I hate him just as much as you do, but you can't show it.
You're from New York as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
But anyway, so that was my premise with Cool. This is, and I told that to the audience. I said, look, this is, this is how it normally goes in the movie. Well, I'm representing, I think his name is Rafe. He was the gang leader. So I'm representing his point of view. This chart personifies him. So I have like all flutes, like that quintessential 1950s flute, low flute, like courtesy of Henry Mancini type thing, and a lot of diminished scale stuff. But I kept it all quiet so that it sets for the bass solo,
Oh, beautiful.
So that was the whole premise. It's like, no, this is not going to get that real loud shouting thing. Like Bernstein had to do it that way. If you see the film, he had to have a lot of, brass hits and things because he was representing the gang leaders. I mean, the gang members who were getting, losing their temper, So Bernstein had his music doing that. Mine, I took a completely other way. But the thing is that there were big concepts that are about humanity, not about music.
Wow.
And then you use the music to support whatever that is, And so here's another piece of advice I'll share for young composers who are maybe new to the game, or they feel like, oh man, how am I ever going to be able to do this? I don't have the technique. So to those people,
you mean the composing technique, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You say, don't worry about that. Say if you tap into your human experience.
Wow.
Because let's face it, like a 9-year-old has the same feeling that you and I have, even though we're older, right? In the sense of sadness, happiness, punishment, accolades.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We can all remember when we were young and whatever. And so that is the equalizer, let's say they can't match the experience of, even somebody who's 10 years older than that, right? If they're 9 years old and they want to start writing, or let's say 15, man, I don't know, I play my instrument, but I don't know how to write music. I don't have the technique for it. Well, do you know the C major scale? Write something with the C major scale.
Yeah.
What do you want to write about? You know, what moves you. You could do the same thing with improvisation, you know.
Yeah.
The whole idea of, I don't know, when you hear somebody like Harry Sweets Edison playing those beautiful harmony mute trumpet solos and bass, you know, just like playing just really simple things, you know. It's not because like, oh, I can't play any more than that.
That comes back to the honesty thing. It just feels very honest. Like I believe him, you know.
Yeah. Or when you hear somebody like Basie who could get around the piano pretty well, but sometimes just going, you know, just doing little things like that. Yeah. It's like, man, the music we don't need any more than that. So we want to embrace simplicity for the right reasons. Yeah. You know, and same thing with complexity. It's not, oh, well, I'm better now because I'm writing more complex.
Yeah.
You know?
Rich, can I wind this up with? I've got a couple of tasty questions for you, which I'd love to know. Can you name for me a jazz solo that always makes you smile and a jazz composition which makes you smile without fail?
I remember when I was a teenager and hearing Spinning Wheel, you know, hearing the great Lou Soloff play that. I could still sing that solo note for note. Great solo, and the way it was put. I mean, that's, you know, if you want to hear.
I don't know it. Give our listeners the full solo.
And then, I don't know, something like that. But it's
nice.
It's great.
Yeah.
And it's only a few bars. It's not like, well, man, you know, he took 4 choruses.
Yeah. Okay. You know? Okay. What about it makes you smile? Is it that it came to you when you were in your teenage years?
Well, somehow at some level I understood how great it was, I guess. I couldn't maybe speak to it the way I could now analytically, but it was in context of the composition, not only in terms of its grammar, but also in terms of its mood. You know, that's the thing, the idea of, when, I don't know, you know, for me, big band, when I'm writing, I think of when I'm going to give a solo in one of my big band charts.
Yeah.
I look at it as like my chart is like my car, and I'm going to give the keys to the car to the soloist.
Nice.
I want that soloist to respect my car and not crash it, you know? And in some ways it's a quid pro quo, right? Because I think, like, I always encourage people to write in English what you want your soloist to do. Start slowly.
Well, literally, like
tone with a dark tone. Sometimes I'll even write a first phrase to kind of give the character. It depends, you know, on how specific it is. But that there's a guide to the soloist. And so we want to stay connected to that soloist. And yet, here again, it's balance. We're going to allow the soloist to have freedom, but at the same time, it's the responsibility. And it's a quid pro quo in the sense of, if the improviser is thinking about that too, thinking about how can I make my improvisation not random, but relevant and connected to the writing that's come before. And ultimately, it reflects well on the soloist, because the people, here again, people connect to it. They somehow figure out that it's like, this is great. And this is what Lou Soloff did on the Blood, Sweat, and Tears Spinning Wheel tune. But, you know, I mean, I love Dick Oates, a friend of mine. You know, we've done projects together, and, you know, I can always count on Dick, man. He's like, he always delivers. You know, he always knows. He's always thinking about the composition. And when we write backgrounds, we can guide our soloist and say, get louder here, build, not yet, pace it, or wind it down, or whatever. We can control that if the soloist is sensitive to it. I mean, one of a disappointing thing could be, let's say you've got a big send-off, you're building the thing, and now it's like, now it comes time to the solo, and now the soloist goes off on a tangent and abandons the style or doesn't match the mood. Right, here's the send-off, and now, ladies and gentlemen, our great soloist. You know, it's like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
You know, so and this is again this idea of feasibility, that it's not to say that you can't have surprise, you know, but it's got to make sense. You know, it's not surprise just for the sake of, if the audience goes, where did that come from? Then what good is that surprise? Rather than, oh, here, wow, I didn't expect that. Right? When somebody says, man, oh, wow, I didn't expect that. That's kind of like, that's not, you know, I didn't expect that, but I get it. I didn't see that one coming, but I get it. Right? That's the kind of, it's the same thing with ambiguity, right? So we could be so ambiguous in the guise of being hip. Oh man, I'm gonna like cover this and cover that, so because I don't want to expose anything. Well, if we go out of balance and everything is so ambiguous, there's no focus. So what's going to happen with the listener? Hey, what is this about?
Yeah.
Do you get it? I don't get it.
If you've covered it, if you're smudging everything, then
you know? So it's like, okay, well, things have to be predictable, but if they're too predictable, then there's no fun in that.
And what you're describing, the masters do, you know, you and Vince and Rich, you know, you guys, I think what you've just described is what you guys do better than anyone. And can I have your jazz composition that always makes you smile? It could be an old piece or a new piece, or a tune, a track, just something that always will make you smile.
Gosh.
It could be the simplest thing. It could be the most complex thing.
Yeah.
I did not email Rich with these questions.
Well, Shiny Stockings is great.
Okay.
Big Dipper.
Okay.
I like that one. I mean, there's so many. Okay. You know, Thad's Lowdown. I love that chart. There are other great charts, but I don't know necessarily if they would make me smile, only because they're more serious.
Yeah, well, yeah, no.
They would make me ooh and ah. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
You know, just, you know, it's funny, like Klaus Ogerman. Klaus Ogerman has got his thing, man. And when you hear it, I mean, I just think about, I think it was the last project he did was, before he passed, was that Look of Love project with Diana Krall. And how he set those standards.
He was on that.
How he set those standards. And man, you know, I hear, you know, as soon as I hear the intro, it's like that's Klaus. And then how he sets it, it makes me smile in the sense of, man, how he arranged that tune. And he does it so simply. And Johnny Mandel with Here's to Life. I mean, you know, you hear, there's that ooh and ah factor, I guess, you know, which ultimately leads you to smile, you know.